Welcome to today's Explainer. You know, I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this one, because we're tackling what a lot of folks in IT consider the Holy Grail, or honestly, maybe even a completely impossible goal. We are looking at how to achieve truly zero-risk enterprise software deployments. We're going to demystify exactly how a platform called IdeaPro actually pulls off this magic, using some seriously clever architectural engineering. If you have ever held your breath during a Friday night software deployment, well, this one is absolutely for you.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Meet the hero of our story, IdeaPro Studio. If you were building software back in the 1990s, you probably remember platforms like Borland Delphi or Microsoft Visual Basic, right? They were legendary. A single analyst could just drag and drop controls and have a working, database-driven app up in a matter of days. But as we all moved to the cloud, we kind of lost that simplicity. Suddenly, you needed this massive, complex stack of React, Fast API, Docker, plus endless database migrations just to get a basic internal tool off the ground. IdeaPro is built to bring that lost simplicity back for the modern cloud era. It's an environment that lets true domain experts, medical practice managers, senior accountants, people like that, build secure, database-backed apps entirely in their browser. And get this, without writing a single line of code.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The app deployment nightmare. 2. The frozen core doctrine. 3. Universal storage architecture. 4. Achieving zero-risk deployments. And finally, 5. The economic advantage. Let's get to it.
Starting off with Section 1, the app deployment nightmare. We're looking at the fundamental fragility of traditional software. Listen, any CTO or IT manager out there absolutely knows the visceral pain of fragmented software silos. And it begs a really critical question. Why are enterprise software deployments so incredibly risky? Well, the answer usually hides deep down in the database. In traditional development, updating an application almost always requires what we call DDL commands, data definition language. We're talking altering tables, changing data types, or running these massive database schema migrations. And the terrifying part? A single typo in a migration script or just one locked table during an update can literally bring down your entire enterprise system. It's just fundamentally fragile.
Think of traditional development a bit like pouring concrete. You've got your React and Fast API stack, sure, but the second you need to add a new feature, you have to run database migrations and restart servers. If you want to change the shape of the building, you literally have to bring out the jackhammers and break the concrete. IdeaPro, on the other hand, takes a completely different approach. It relies on governed metadata and pre-compiled schemas to achieve zero downtime. It's kind of like having a building that is endlessly configurable, but you never ever have to tear down the physical walls.
Moving on to Section 2, the frozen core doctrine. This is the platform's foundational rule.
So the crucial point to understand here is the frozen core doctrine. It simply states that the core platform codebase is totally 100% frozen. When a user creates a new custom application, or a custom user interface, a workflow, a business rule, whatever it is, the system must not modify a single line of core Python or React code. And critically, it must never ever execute a database DDL command. No create table, no alter table, nothing. The platform's core code stays completely static, permanently isolating the underlying system from any deployment breakages.
Now you might be wondering, if you aren't writing code and you aren't creating new database tables, what exactly are you doing? Well, instead of code, everything built on IdeaPro is stored as raw metadata inside a highly optimized, completely static database schema. Your new interface, your fancy new business logic, your custom fields, they are literally just data entries sitting in an existing table. Which leads us perfectly into our next question. Where does all that data actually go?
That brings us to Section 3, Universal Storage Architecture. Essentially, the end of custom database tables.
All right, let's walk through this architecture together. IdeaPro operates on a pre-compiled 11-table universal storage schema running on MySQL. Now, notice what's actually missing from these core tables. You won't see an employees table. There is no timesheets table. Instead, you've got universal applications to register the app's namespace, universal entity types to define what an employee or a timesheet logically is, and universal field definitions to set the rules for that data. The actual raw data points, those live in universal records and universal field values. This is absolutely brilliant because it proves there's a real concrete architecture here. You never alter the database structure itself, you just add metadata to these 11 universal tables.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how it addresses the elephant in the room. Any database engineer watching this is probably shouting at their screen right now going, wait, Entity attribute value models are incredibly slow because they require way too many joins, and honestly, they'd normally be right. EAV architectures can seriously degrade performance at scale, but IdeaPro's engineers actually solved this using something called ROP, the Read Optimized Projection Engine. Here's how it works. When a record is saved, the backend asynchronously serializes it into a flat JSON format and syncs it over to a search index or read-only SQL view. So when you're searching or loading a list, you're just hitting a flat projection. You get all the infinite flexibility of metadata, but you maintain those lightning-fast sub-millisecond query speeds at scale. It's just a remarkable piece of defensive engineering.
Which takes us to Section 4, Achieving Zero-Risk Deployments. Let's look at the governance lifecycle. Because everything in this system is just metadata, IdeaPro can enforce a really strict multi-tier governance pipeline. It flows like this. First, you have draft. That's where an asset is built and verified locally. Second is review. A checklist validates that everything is mapped out properly. Third, approved. An admin actually signs off on security and dependencies. And finally, production, where it goes live to end users. The massive takeaway here is that moving an app through these 4 stages involves absolutely zero database migrations. Moving to production is literally just flipping a metadata status flag from approved to production.
And right there is the solution to our initial nightmare. Because there are no DDL changes, no altering of tables, no restarting of application servers, deployments are reduced to mere metadata updates. If something goes wrong, no problem. Rollbacks are instant. You just revert the metadata state. That is what it actually means to have a truly zero-risk deployment. The system maintains complete security isolation, and those dreaded Friday night deployments suddenly become entirely stress-free.
Finally, Section 5, the economic advantage. Let's talk about the real-world impact of eliminating those migrations.
The comparison here brilliantly illustrates exactly where IdeaPro stands apart from your standard low-code challengers. Platforms like Retool are great, sure, but they still require developers to write SQL and manage database migrations. Bubble is super visually intuitive, but it traps your data in a proprietary cloud and, under the hood, still requires database updates. Microsoft Power Apps? It locks you into a pretty rigid Dataverse schema. But IdeaPro? Right up there at the top, boasts true zero DDL deployment through its universal schema. It basically gives you the visual ease of Bubble, but paired with the enterprise-grade stability and local deployment capabilities you really need.
So what does all this actually mean for productivity? Well, it equates to a massive 5 to 10x multiplier in developer efficiency. IdeaPro essentially splits software engineering right down the middle. Your expensive, advanced developers, they get to spend 100% of their time securing the core platform and building reusable components. Meanwhile, product specialists, the actual domain experts who truly understand the business problem, can design layouts, wire up workflows, and build out entire apps completely on their own. They never have to submit a ticket to IT just to wait for compiled code or database migrations. That bottleneck is completely removed.
And when you eliminate that bottleneck, the cost savings over a 3-year span are honestly staggering. To put that into perspective, traditional custom dev easily exceeds $150,000 when you factor in developer headcount and server hosting. Standard enterprise low-code usually sits somewhere between $55,000 and $95,000 because of per-seat licensing and ongoing maintenance audits. But the IdeaPro platform, it drops the total cost of ownership all the way down to between $10,000 and $25,000. Why? Because you're completely eliminating the need for dedicated developer headcount for custom apps, and your ongoing maintenance costs drop to basically zero. The frozen core ensures that nothing ever breaks during an update.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. If domain experts, we're talking accountants, lawyers, doctors, can now build highly secure, zero-risk enterprise systems purely through visual metadata, thanks to the frozen core and universal storage, is the era of writing custom database migrations officially over? It's a fascinating paradigm shift, and the math certainly points to a yes. I highly encourage you to seek out the IdeaPro white paper to explore this architecture even further. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and we will see you next time.